20 women rejected the millionaire on blind dates, until a poor black girl said yes. The marble floors of Le Bernardin reflected the chandelier light as Elijah Westbrook adjusted his deliberately cheap watch for the 20th time that month. Across from him sat Miranda, a stunning brunette with perfect posture and a designer handbag that probably cost more than most people's rent. She had been talking for 15 minutes straight about her yoga instructor's spiritual awakening in Bali. "So what exactly do you do again?" Miranda asked, finally pausing to sip her wine. Her manicured fingers drummed against the crystal glass as she waited for his answer. Elijah had perfected this moment. The careful pause. The modest smile. The deliberately vague response that had become his litmus test. "I'm a freelance consultant," he said, watching her expression carefully. "I help businesses optimize their processes." The change was instant. Miranda's smile tightened at the corners. Her eyes lost their sparkle and began scanning the restaurant, probably looking for someone more interesting, more profitable. "Oh," she said, the single syllable carrying the weight of 20 previous disappointments. "That's nice." The rest of dinner dragged on like a funeral march. Miranda checked her phone 6 times, mentioned she had an early morning, and when the bill came, she suddenly remembered she'd left her wallet in her other purse. Elijah paid, of course. He always did. As Miranda's Uber disappeared into the Manhattan traffic, Elijah stood alone on the sidewalk, his reflection staring back at him from the restaurant's windows. Behind that glass, other couples laughed and flirted, their conversations flowing like fine wine. Out here, the city's cold November air cut through his deliberately modest jacket, a $40 Target purchase that had become his costume. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant, Sarah. "How did it go with Miranda?" He typed back. "Number 20. 3 dots appeared immediately. Sarah was probably sitting in her Park Avenue apartment, surrounded by case files from the matchmaking agencies they'd hired. Elite Connections. Manhattan's finest. The Millionaire's Circle. Each one had promised to find him, quality women, who would appreciate him for who he was, not what he owned. They had failed spectacularly. "Want to talk about it?" Sarah's text read. Elijah hailed a cab, sliding into the worn leather seat as the driver pulled away from the curb. The city lights blurred past his window, a kaleidoscope of dreams and disappointments that mirrored his own journey. He thought about the first date. Amanda, a pediatric nurse who seemed genuinely kind until she learned he didn't own a car. Then Jessica, the art teacher who lost interest when he mentioned taking the subway. Date after date, the pattern repeated like a broken record. The worst had been Chloe, date number 16. She'd actually laughed when he said he lived in Brooklyn. Not the trendy part, actual Brooklyn, where real people lived real lives. Her laugh had echoed through the restaurant like a slap, turning heads and burning his cheeks with embarrassment. By date 18, he'd started keeping a mental scorecard. How long before they asked about his job? Date 12, Victoria, had lasted exactly 4 minutes. A new record for superficiality. The taxi pulled up to his building, a modest brownstone that he'd bought under an LLC to maintain his cover. The doorman, Miguel, nodded as he passed. Miguel didn't care about Elijah's net worth. He cared about the Christmas bonus and the fact that Elijah always asked about his daughter's soccer games. His apartment was sparse by design. IKEA furniture mixed with a few carefully chosen pieces that looked expensive but weren't. No awards on the walls, no photos from his tech conferences, no signs of the empire he'd built from nothing. Elijah poured himself a glass of wine, not the $200 bottle from his private collection, but a $12 Trader Joe's find that had become his default for this experiment in authenticity. He sat on his simple couch and stared at the framed photo on his coffee table. It was the only genuine thing in the room, a picture of him and his grandmother on her front porch in Alabama, both of them grinning despite having nothing but each other. Grandma Rose had raised him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 8. She cleaned office buildings at night and took in laundry during the day, but she never complained. Never made him feel like they were poor, even when dinner was peanut butter sandwiches for the 3rd night in a row. Money don't make the man, baby, she used to say while helping him with homework at the kitchen table. Character does. You remember that when you're all grown up and fancy. He'd remembered. Even as his tech startup exploded into a multi-million-dollar empire, even as Forbes put him on their 30 under 30 list, even as his bank account grew beyond his wildest childhood dreams, he'd remembered. But somewhere along the way, everyone else had forgotten. His phone rang, jarring him from his memories. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "You don't have to say anything," she said before he could speak. "I can hear it in your breathing." She was just like the others. Elijah set down his wine glass and rubbed his temples. Sarah had been with him since the early days of his company, back when they worked out of a coffee shop and split dollar menu burgers for lunch. She was more than an assistant, she was family. The sister he'd never had. "I'm starting to think Grandma Rose was wrong," he said quietly. "Maybe character doesn't matter anymore. Maybe it's all about the zeros in your bank account." "Don't you dare." Sarah's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare let these shallow women make you cynical. There are good people out there, Elijah. Real people. 20 dates, Sarah. 20 perfectly orchestrated failures. So we try a different approach." Elijah laughed bitterly. "What's left? Speed dating? Dating apps? I've tried everything." "Not everything." He could hear her typing in the background. "Remember that charity gala you spoke at last month? The one for domestic violence survivors? What about it? They have a dating service. Well, not exactly a service. More like community events. Mixers for people who've been through tough times. People who understand that life isn't about surface things." Elijah sat up straighter. "You want me to lie about being an abuse survivor? No, you idiot. They have allies events too. For people who support their cause. I'm looking at their website now, there's a dinner tomorrow night. Very casual. No profiles, no background checks, just showing up." "Sarah, I don't know." "One more try," she interrupted. "What's the worst that could happen? Another woman judges you for being just a consultant? At least these women understand struggle. Real struggle." Elijah stared at his grandmother's photo. Rose was smiling in that picture, genuinely happy despite having nothing. She'd found joy in small things, Sunday morning church hymns, tomatoes from her garden, helping neighbors who had even less than she did. "Okay," he said finally. "One more try." "Really? One more try. But if this one fails, I'm done. I'll buy a cat and become one of those rich hermits who orders groceries online." Sarah laughed. "Deal. I'll send you the details." "And Elijah?" "Yeah? Wear that blue sweater. The one with the small hole in the sleeve. It makes you look approachable." After hanging up, Elijah walked to his bedroom window. The city sprawled beneath him, millions of lights representing millions of dreams. Somewhere out there was a woman who might see past the surface, who might care more about his heart than his bank account. Tomorrow would be date number 21. His last shot at finding something real in a world that seemed increasingly fake. He just hoped he hadn't forgotten how to recognize authenticity when he found it. The community center smelled like coffee and hope. Elijah arrived 15 minutes early, clutching a bouquet of grocery store flowers that had cost him $8, a far cry from the elaborate arrangements he usually sent to business partners. The dining hall was decorated with handmade banners and mismatched tablecloths, a stark contrast to the five-star restaurants where his previous dates had unfolded. He checked his watch, 7:30 p.m. sharp. His date was supposed to meet him at table 7, marked with a small paper tent that read, "Lena and Elijah," in careful handwriting. The other couples around him were already deep in conversation, their laughter genuine and unforced. 7:35 p.m. Still no sign of her. Elijah straightened his blue sweater, the one with the hole Sarah had insisted he wear, and tried not to feel stood up. Maybe this was karma for all those expensive dinners wasted on women who saw dollar signs instead of human beings. 7:42 p.m. The volunteer coordinator, A kind-faced woman named Mrs. Patterson approached his table with an apologetic smile. "Elijah? I just got a call from Lena. She's running late. Had to cover an unexpected shift at work. She'll be here soon." A shift. Not a spa appointment or a yoga class, but an actual job that required her to show up when called. Something about that detail made him sit up straighter. At 7:53 p.m., the dining hall door burst open, and in rushed a young woman with wild curls escaping from a hastily assembled ponytail. She wore a cream-colored cardigan that had seen better days, the kind of soft wool that becomes more beautiful with age and wear. Her jeans were clean but faded, and her sneakers, white Converse with hand-drawn doodles on the rubber edges, squeaked slightly against the linoleum floor. She scanned the room frantically until her eyes landed on him. Even from across the room, he could see her shoulders relax with relief. "Elijah?" she called out, weaving between tables with an apologetic smile for everyone she passed. "I'm Lena. I'm so sorry I'm late." As she got closer, he noticed the details that would stay with him long after this night ended. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong, creating a slightly lopsided look that somehow made her more endearing. Her hands shook slightly, whether from cold, nerves, or exhaustion, he couldn't tell. But her eyes were bright, genuinely apologetic, and completely focused on him. "I had to cover for someone at the last minute," she explained, sliding into the chair across from him. "I almost didn't come because I thought you'd think I stood you up, and then I thought maybe you'd already left and—" She stopped herself, laughing nervously. "I'm rambling. I do that when I'm anxious." "You're here now," Elijah said, surprised by how much he meant it. "That's what matters." Throughout dinner, simple spaghetti and garlic bread served by volunteers, Lena never once asked about his job. Not directly, not indirectly, not at all. Instead, she told him about the book she was reading, a dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, that she pulled from her purse. "I know it's required reading in high school," she said, twirling spaghetti around her fork with the concentration of someone who'd learned proper table manners later in life. "But I never finished high school the traditional way, so I'm catching up on all the classics." She asked him about his favorite books, his thoughts on the city's new bus routes, whether he believed in second chances. Her questions were personal but not invasive, curious but not calculating. When dessert, store-bought cookies arranged on paper plates, was served, she declined. "Not because I'm watching my weight or anything," she said quickly. I get full easily." But Elijah noticed how her eyes lingered on the chocolate-chip cookies, and he wondered when she'd last had dessert that wasn't a luxury she couldn't afford. As the evening wound down and couples began to leave, Lena surprised him with a question that no woman had ever asked him before. "Can you walk me home?" Not, "Can you call me a cab?" or, "Where did you park?" But a simple request for his company, his presence, his time. They stepped into the November night together, and Lena pulled her cardigan tighter against the cold. The streets were quieter here, away from Manhattan's constant hum. Their footsteps echoed off the sidewalk as they walked through a neighborhood that spoke of working families and small dreams. "I want to be a social worker," she said suddenly, as if the darkness made confessions easier. "I know it doesn't pay much, and people think it's depressing work, but I think it's the most important job in the world. Helping people find their way back to themselves." They passed a bus stop where she paused to read the schedule posted behind scratched plexiglass. "I take the 42 bus to work," she said. "It's funny how you start to recognize the same faces every day. There's this elderly man who always sits in the third seat, and a woman who knits while she rides. Sometimes I wonder about their stories." Elijah found himself walking slower, wanting to stretch these moments like taffy. When was the last time someone had shared something so genuine with him? When had he last cared about strangers on a bus? "Do you ever feel like silence is safer than noise?" she asked as they turned down a quieter street. The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes when people talk too much, they're trying to fill up spaces where truth might accidentally slip out. But silence lets you hear what's really important." They walked the next block in comfortable quiet, their breath creating small clouds in the cold air. Finally, they stopped in front of a building that looked like it had seen better decades. The sign was discreet, but Elijah could make out the words, Harbor House, in faded letters. "This is me," Lena said, pulling out a set of keys that jingled softly in the night air. Elijah looked around, realizing they were standing in front of what appeared to be some kind of shelter or transitional housing. The building was clean but institutional, with small windows and a security door. "Let me call you a cab," he offered, reaching for his phone. Lena's smile was gentle but firm. "I don't have cab money, and I don't take what I can't pay back." She slipped her key into a side door that he now noticed was separate from the main entrance. As the door opened, warm light spilled onto the sidewalk, along with the distant sound of voices and children laughing. "Thank you for tonight, Elijah," she said, turning back to face him. "For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was actually listening to me, not just waiting for their turn to talk." And then she was gone, disappearing through that side door like something from a dream. Elijah stood on the empty sidewalk for a long moment, staring at the building that had swallowed up the most interesting woman he met in years. For the first time in 21 dates, he wasn't thinking about what had gone wrong. He was thinking about when he might see her again. 3 days passed, and Elijah couldn't stop thinking about Lena's words. "I don't take what I can't pay back." The phrase haunted him during board meetings, echoed in his mind while he reviewed quarterly reports, and whispered to him in the quiet moments before sleep. He tried calling the community center, but Mrs. Patterson politely explained they didn't give out personal information about their participants. Sarah had offered to run a background check, something she did routinely for potential business partners, but Elijah had refused. Some instinct told him that digging into Lena's past without permission would violate the trust she'd shown him. But curiosity won over conscience on Thursday morning. "I want to make a donation," he told the receptionist at Harbor House, clutching a check for $5,000, enough to seem generous without raising questions about his true wealth. The building looked different in daylight. The institutional beige walls seemed warmer somehow, decorated with children's artwork and motivational posters. The lobby buzzed with quiet activity, women signing up for job interviews, kids doing homework at plastic tables, volunteers sorting donated clothes. "Mr. Westbrook?" A woman in her 50s approached with a warm smile. "I'm Director Martinez. Thank you so much for thinking of our residents." As she led him on a tour, explaining their programs for transitional housing and job training, Elijah's eyes searched every corner for a glimpse of wild curls and a cream cardigan. He found her in the community kitchen. Lena stood behind a serving counter, ladling soup into bowls with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times. She wore a hairnet and an apron over jeans and a simple sweater, but her smile as she served each resident was radiant. A small girl with pigtails ran up to hug her legs, and Lena bent down to whisper something that made the child giggle. "That's one of our success stories," Director Martinez said, following his gaze. "Lena's been with us 8 months now. Works 2 jobs, takes classes at the community college, and still volunteers in the kitchen whenever she can. She's studying to become a social worker." Elijah watched as Lena helped an elderly woman navigate the food line, her patience evident in every gentle gesture. When she looked up and saw him through the serving window, her face lit up with surprise and something that might have been joy. "Elijah? What are you doing here?" "Making a donation," he said, holding up the check like evidence. "I wanted to support the community center's work." Her eyes narrowed slightly, and he caught a flicker of something, wariness? Disappointment? "That's very generous of you," she said carefully, turning back to her serving duties. Director Martinez excused herself to take a phone call, leaving them alone on opposite sides of the serving counter. The lunch rush had ended, and the dining room was nearly empty. "You don't seem happy to see me," Elijah said. Lena untied her apron and came around the counter. "I am happy. I'm just surprised. Most people don't seek out women from shelters for second dates. This isn't about the shelter," he said. "It's about you." She studied his face for a long moment, then gestured toward a quiet corner where they could talk. They sat on folding chairs that had seen better years, surrounded by bulletin boards covered in job postings and apartment listings. "Can I ask you something?" Lena said. "Why did you really come here?" The honest answer would have revealed too much, that he'd been thinking about her constantly, that something about her had broken through walls he'd spent years building. Instead, he said, "I wanted to see you again." "Why?" The simple question caught him off guard. In his world of corporate negotiations and strategic partnerships, people's motivations were usually transparent. Money, power, connections. But Lena's directness demanded honesty. "Because you asked about books instead of bank accounts," he said. "Because you care about strangers on buses. Because you see the world differently than anyone I've ever met." During their conversation, she mentioned her schedule: community college classes in the morning, a caregiver job in the afternoon, and night shifts as a janitor at an office building downtown. When he asked about sleep, she laughed. "Sleep is overrated. There's too much life to live." But he could see the exhaustion in the way she rubbed her temples, the careful way she moved as if conserving energy for the long night ahead. As he prepared to leave, she walked him to the door. "Thank you for the donation, Elijah. It really will help. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime," he suggested. "When you have a free moment." "Free moments are rare," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "But I'd like that." He left Harbor House with her phone number written on a scrap of paper and a growing sense that he'd only scratched the surface of who Lena really was. That night, curiosity finally overwhelmed his principles. He opened his laptop and typed her name into Google's search bar. Nothing. No Facebook profile, no Instagram account, no LinkedIn page. In an age where everyone left digital footprints, Lena was a ghost. He tried different spellings, added Harbor House to his search terms, even looked up the community college's enrollment database through a contact he had there. Still nothing. It was as if she'd appeared in his life fully formed, with no past and no digital presence. Intrigued, he dug deeper. Sarah had taught him a few tricks over the years: how to search public records, how to trace addresses through voter registrations. What he found made his blood run cold. A police report from 2 years ago in Ohio. A restraining order against someone named Marcus Richardson. Court documents detailing domestic violence charges. And at the center of it all, a different name, Elena Martinez. She'd fled across state lines and started over with a new identity. The woman who'd asked about books and worried about strangers on buses had escaped something terrible enough to make her disappear completely. As he stared at the documents on his screen, Elijah realized that everything about their dinner, her nervousness, her careful way of speaking, her refusal to take a cab, suddenly made perfect sense. Lena wasn't just poor. She was hiding. And tomorrow, he had to decide whether to pretend he knew nothing, or risk losing her trust by revealing what he'd discovered. Elijah spent the entire night staring at his ceiling, Marcus Richardson's police mugshot burned into his memory. The man looked ordinary, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance. But the details in the police report painted a different picture: 3 emergency room visits, neighbors calling 911, and finally, Lena, fleeing in the middle of the night with nothing but a backpack and her grandmother's ring. By morning, he'd made his decision. He wouldn't mention what he'd found, but he couldn't pretend her struggles didn't exist. He called her at noon, catching her between her morning classes and afternoon shift. "Lunch?" he asked. "My treat. There's a quiet cafe near the college. I can't afford." "My treat," he repeated gently. "Please." The Sunrise Cafe was exactly what its name suggested, cheerful and unpretentious, with mismatched chairs and local artwork covering the walls. Lena arrived right on time, wearing the same cardigan from their first date but with different jeans. Her textbooks were tucked under her arm, and he could see sticky notes protruding from the pages. "Psychology of Social Work," she said, catching him looking at the books. "Fascinating stuff, actually. Did you know that the most important factor in helping someone isn't resources or expertise? It's whether they feel truly seen. As they ordered soup and half sandwiches, nothing fancy, Elijah wrestled with how to begin. Everything he'd rehearsed sounded condescending or intrusive. "Lena," he said finally, after the waitress had left. "I want to help you." Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Help me with what?" "Your situation. School, housing, work, everything. I have connections, resources. I could set you up with better housing, cover your tuition, maybe get you an internship at a good social services organization." The change in her expression was immediate and devastating. The warmth drained from her eyes, replaced by something cold and defensive. She set down her spoon with deliberate care. "What exactly do you think my situation is, Elijah?" He'd stepped into a minefield without realizing it. "I just meant, you're working so hard, juggling so much. You shouldn't have to struggle like this." "Struggle?" Her voice was quiet, but he could hear the storm brewing beneath it. "Is that what you think I'm doing? Struggling? I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it?" She leaned forward, her eyes never leaving his face. "Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you've decided I'm some charity case who needs rescuing." Other diners began to glance their way, sensing the tension. Elijah lowered his voice, trying to salvage the conversation. "That's not what I meant. I care about you, and I want to make your life easier." "Easier." She repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "My life isn't a problem to be solved, Elijah. It's a life I'm building. Every class I take, every shift I work, every small step forward, that's me creating something that belongs to me." Her hands were shaking now, and he realized with horror that there were tears in her eyes. "You want to know what I thought when I met you?" she continued, her voice breaking slightly. "I thought, finally, someone who doesn't see me as broken. Someone who asks about books instead of what's wrong with me. Someone who listens when I talk instead of already planning how to fix me. Lena, please. You don't get to fix me to feel better about yourself." The words came out like a slap, sharp and final. "I trusted you because you didn't try to buy me. I mattered because you listened. Now I'm just another pity project." She stood abruptly, grabbing her textbooks and clutching them against her chest like armor. "My ex-boyfriend used to say the same things," she said, and Elijah's blood turned to ice. "He wanted to help me, take care of me, make decisions for me. It started with little things, paying for dinner, choosing what movie we'd watch. Then it was bigger things, where I worked, who I could talk to, where I could go." "That's not what this is," Elijah said desperately. "I would never. You already have." Her voice was steady now, but tears were sliding down her cheeks. "You looked at me and saw someone who needed saving instead of someone who was already saving herself." She walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back one last time. "The saddest part is that I was starting to believe someone could care about me without trying to change me. I guess I was wrong." The cafe door chimed as she left, and Elijah sat alone with 2 cooling bowls of soup and the wreckage of his good intentions. He tried calling her that evening. The number was disconnected. He tried again the next day. Still nothing. On the 3rd day, he drove to Harbor House, but Director Martinez met him at the door with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, Mr. Westbrook. Lena has moved on to more permanent housing. She left this morning, and per our policy, I can't share her new address." "Did she leave any message?" he asked desperately. Director Martinez hesitated, then pulled a sealed envelope from her desk drawer. His name was written across the front in Lena's careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines. "Elijah, thank you for making me feel seen, just once. I hope you find someone who appreciates being saved. That person isn't me. Don't look for me. I don't want to be found. L." Standing in the parking lot of Harbor House, holding the letter that felt like a goodbye, Elijah realized he'd made the same mistake as every woman who'd rejected him. He'd looked at Lena and seen what he wanted to change about her instead of accepting who she was. The difference was, losing Lena hurt in ways he never thought possible. Because for the first time in his life, he'd met someone worth keeping exactly as they were, and he'd driven her away by trying to make her into someone else. The obsession began quietly, like a whisper that grows into a scream. At first, Elijah told himself he just wanted to apologize. He drove through Brooklyn neighborhoods at odd hours, scanning bus stops and community college campuses for a flash of wild curls or a cream-colored cardigan. He memorized the route of the 42 bus, riding it end-to-end during morning and evening rush hours, hoping to spot her among the familiar faces she'd once described. "Sir, you've been on this bus for 3 hours," the driver said one Thursday evening. "Everything okay?" Elijah paid for another ride. Sarah tried intervention through work. "You missed the quarterly board meeting," she said, standing in his office doorway with arms crossed. "The one you never miss. Ever. Reschedule it." "I did. 3 times. His company was running itself, which should have been satisfying. Instead, it felt meaningless. Every successful product launch, every new partnership, every million added to his net worth felt hollow without someone who cared about books instead of bank statements to share it with. He hired a private investigator, then fired him after 2 days. "Find her," he'd said, but tracking someone who deliberately erased herself felt wrong. It felt like Marcus Richardson. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Patterson from the community center. "I've been thinking about you and Lena," she said when he showed up for the 4th time that month, carrying another donation check. "You seem troubled." "I made a mistake," Elijah said simply. "I want to fix it." "Some mistakes can't be fixed by finding the person you hurt," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "Sometimes you fix them by becoming the person who wouldn't make that mistake again." That night, Elijah drove to his favorite thinking spot, the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. The city sprawled beneath him, millions of lights representing millions of dreams and disappointments. He thought about Grandma Rose, about her quiet dignity and her refusal to accept charity from neighbors who had more than she did. "I don't take what I can't pay back," Lena had said, echoing his grandmother's pride across generations and circumstances. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He'd been searching for Lena the same way the 20 women had evaluated him, looking for what he could get rather than what he could give. He spent the next 3 weeks visiting every bus driver on the 42 route, every professor at the community college, every social services office in a 50-mile radius. Not asking for Lena's location, but asking what they needed. "Scholarship fund," said Professor Martinez at Brooklyn Community College. "So many students drop out because they can't afford textbooks." "Night childcare," said a weary social worker at Family Services. "Single mothers can't take evening classes if they have nowhere safe to leave their kids." "Job training," said the manager at a women's employment center. "Basic computer skills, interview preparation, resume writing." Each conversation planted seeds of an idea that grew larger and more complex. On a rainy Tuesday in December, Elijah found himself back at Harbor House, not with a check this time, but with questions. "What if someone wanted to create something bigger?" he asked Director Martinez. "Not just donations, but real infrastructure. Housing with built-in support services, education programs that lead to actual careers, childcare that doesn't bankrupt families. That would take millions," she said. "And someone who truly understands that these women don't need saving, they need opportunities." That night, Elijah called his lawyer and his accountant. By morning, the paperwork was in motion for the largest charitable foundation he'd ever conceived. The Lena Project. He chose the name carefully, not as a monument to his own guilt, but as a promise to honor what she tried to teach him, that dignity wasn't something you gave people. It was something you helped them reclaim for themselves. 6 months later, he stood in the construction site that would become the foundation's first campus. Not a shelter, but transitional housing with on-site childcare, computer labs, and classrooms. Not charity, but opportunity. His phone rang. "Sarah. You need to see this," she said. "Someone left something in the foundation's donation box." He found the note that evening, folded inside an envelope with no return address. "Mr. Westbrook. I heard about the Lena Project from a friend who's applying for the scholarship program. I don't know why you used that name, but I hope it's for the right reasons. I've been watching the construction from the bus stop across the street sometimes. It's beautiful. Not because of the building, but because of what it represents, helping people help themselves instead of helping them become what you think they should be. I won't pretend I'm not still angry about how things ended between us. But I'm not angry about this. This feels different. This feels like you actually listened. Don't look for me. I don't want to be saved. But thank you for making me feel seen, just once. Maybe that was enough to change everything. L. Elijah read the letter 17 times that night, sitting in his empty apartment with tears he hadn't allowed himself to shed in months. She was still out there, still building her own life on her own terms. Still refusing to be saved. And for the first time since he'd lost her, that felt exactly right. 2 years later, the Lena Project had become everything Elijah had envisioned and more. The first campus housed 47 women and their children, with a waiting list that stretched for months. The job training programs boasted an 87% employment rate. The on-site childcare had eliminated the impossible choice between education and parenting that had derailed so many dreams. But success felt hollow without the one person who'd inspired it all. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the second campus was scheduled for a crisp October morning. Elijah had wanted something small, just the residents, staff, and local officials. But word had spread, and now nearly 200 people filled the courtyard, including reporters from 3 newspapers and a local TV station. "You ready for this?" Sarah asked, adjusting his tie. She'd been promoted to executive director of operations, overseeing all foundation activities. Her desk was covered with applications from women across the tri-state area, each one representing a life that could be transformed. Elijah nodded, though his stomach churned with familiar anxiety. Public speaking had never been his strength, even in his corporate days. But these women deserved more than a polished speech written by consultants. They deserved his truth. The podium faced a crowd that looked like America itself, women of every age and background, children darting between folding chairs, volunteers wearing bright blue, Lena Project t-shirts. In the front row sat Maria, the first resident to graduate from their nursing program, now working at Mount Sinai. Beside her was Janet, whose twins had been in the on-site daycare while she earned her teaching certificate. Elijah stepped to the microphone, his prepared remarks folded in his pocket. Instead, he spoke from his heart. 2.5 years ago, he began, his voice carrying across the courtyard. I met someone who taught me the difference between helping and fixing. Between seeing potential and imposing solutions. Between offering opportunity and demanding gratitude. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the typical donor speech about changing lives and giving back. I thought I knew what people needed, he continued. I thought resources and good intentions were enough. But I learned that the most important thing you can give someone isn't money or housing or job training, though those things matter. The most important thing you can give someone is the chance to save themselves. His eyes swept the crowd, past the cameras and reporters, past the residents and their families, to the very back where a small cluster of people stood in the shade of an oak tree. There, wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt and jeans, clutching a spiral notebook against her chest, was Lena. Elijah's breath caught, but he forced himself to continue speaking. She was thinner than he remembered, her curls now pulled back in a neat bun that suggested professional settings and important meetings. But her eyes, those eyes that had asked about books and strangers on buses, were exactly the same. The Lena Project exists because someone once told me that dignity isn't something you give people, he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. It's something you help them reclaim for themselves. This campus, these programs, these opportunities, they're not about saving anyone. They're about creating space for people to save themselves. The crowd erupted in applause, but Elijah barely heard it. Lena had moved closer, no longer hidden behind the tree. Their eyes met across the courtyard, and she offered the smallest of nods, acknowledgement, perhaps even approval. Some people don't want a ladder, he concluded, borrowing words from a conversation they'd had what felt like a lifetime ago. They just need space to stand. As the crowd dispersed for the reception, Elijah found himself surrounded by well-wishers and media representatives. He answered their questions mechanically, his attention focused on the woman who disappeared back into the crowd. 20 minutes later, as he finally broke free from the interviews, he felt a presence beside him. "I saw what you did," a familiar voice said quietly. "That mattered." He turned to find Lena standing a careful arm's length away, her notebook now tucked under her arm. Up close, he could see she wore a small pin on her sweatshirt. "MSW candidate, Columbia University. You're in graduate school," he said, unable to keep the pride from his voice. "Full scholarship," she replied with a smile that reached her eyes. "Not from your foundation, from Columbia's social justice program. I earned it." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching families explore the new playground, children's laughter echoing off the building walls. "Walk with me?" Lena asked. They fell into step together, leaving the celebration behind for the quiet sidewalks that bordered the campus. The October air carried the scent of fallen leaves and new beginnings. "I never thanked you properly," she said as they walked. "For listening. For learning. For building something that helps without trying to fix." "You don't need to thank me," Elijah replied. "You taught me what helping actually looks like." "Did I?" she asked, glancing at him sideways. "Because I've been thinking about that night at dinner, about how angry I got. I think maybe I was so afraid of being saved that I couldn't see the difference between control and care." They paused at the corner where the sidewalks split, one path leading back to the ceremony, the other toward the bus stop where the 42 route would carry passengers to their next destinations. "For what it's worth," Elijah said, "I think we both learned something important. About seeing people for who they are instead of who we think they should become." Lena smiled, the same genuine expression that had captivated him 3 years ago in a community center dining room. "Want to know something funny?" she said. "I ride the 42 bus past this construction site every day on my way to my internship at Family Court. I've been watching this place grow from nothing into something beautiful. And every day, I thought about a conversation we had about strangers on buses and the stories we don't know." "What kind of stories?" Elijah asked. "The kind where two people meet at exactly the wrong time but in exactly the right way," she said. "The kind where they have to lose each other to find themselves. The kind where the ending isn't about getting the girl or saving the day, but about becoming people worth knowing." They began walking again, side by side down the campus sidewalk. Not toward any particular destination, not running from any particular past, just moving forward together. For once, no one was trying to save anyone. They were simply walking toward whatever came next, two people who had learned that the best love stories aren't about rescue, they're about recognition. About seeing someone completely and choosing to walk beside them, not ahead of them or behind them, but alongside them as they write their own story. And in the golden light of an October afternoon, that felt like the most revolutionary thing in the world.